about what's your earliest memory of your parents?
Memory? I maybe going on vacations together, to Canada and stuff like that. I don't have a specific memory. There's tons of memories.
Okay. Tell me about your house. What's your...
That house was bought when I was a senior in high school, and they had been waiting, my dad had been waiting for that house. Not specifically that one, but a house in Garden City. His whole life, he had worked very hard to kind of have that house in Garden City. He always wanted. We had moved numerous amounts of times as a kid in North Carolina and different places he did projects in, and some developments that we had lived in, and he was trying to build a house. We ended up back in New York. We ended up in that house because he had a certain time limit to buy a house in order to not get taxed. So he ended up with the house in Garden City after looking at, tons of homes on Long Island. And he really loved that house. And we ended up living there. I finished my school year out in Mineola instead of Garden City. And yeah, he, for the remainder of their years before he had a stroke, that's where they were.
And they love the house.
They love the house. They were there for a little over 20 years, which obviously dates me.
So, you were tasked with selling the house.
I am the youngest of 3 sisters. I was tasked with selling the house because I was the closest to my parents. My other sister lives in Ireland. The other one lives in Massachusetts. So I was tasked to sell the house, which, I had absolutely no idea how to do that because I had never sold a house ever. So this was me learning the whole entire process all at once of what you're supposed to do when you're selling a house, which was, my knowledge at the beginning was very limited. I might have thought I knew, but I wasn't even close to understanding the whole process that goes along with it.
Well, tell me about the emotion of trying to, and all the conflicts and things like that of trying to sell a parent's house, especially while they're still alive.
Right. During the experience, it was kind of a fast-paced process because I was under the impression my dad was going to go home and go back to work, but unfortunately he went to visit my mom in Florida so that they could have a little vacation time together, and he ended up having a stroke down there in Florida, and then we had the realization he was never going to come back. The taxes were quite high in Garden City. The mortgage was still, evident. We still had a mortgage that we were paying off, and it was a lot because I was also dealing with getting my dad back in order, thinking that I could miraculously change everything. So I had a lot of that weight on my shoulders, to make sure that they are secure and taken care of, and then also the weight of my dad having some sort of recovery from the stroke. And it was very new on the stroke. It was maybe a couple weeks after he had the stroke that they were like, hey, we're not going to be able to afford this house, so you got to sell it. And in that, being the youngest of the family, that was a lot of pressure for me because my dad was always the controller of the family. He always liked things in his hands and in his control. And I'm the baby of the family coming in, trying to act as if I have some control.
And even during the process, I'm sure he had a hard time letting go of control.
Very much so. and his control wasn't complete thought. So it, a lot of the things that he was coming up with or saying to me over the phone were not of what he would say before the stroke. So some of it was just his own things he was dealing with in his mind. So there's a control factor in there. He has no control anymore. He's trying to put control in there, but he's confused. So there's a lot of confusion. He is trying to keep it together as much as he can and kind of still be that rock, but it's very hard to be that rock when you have no control in your current life. So that was kind of difficult. And the fact that he really didn't want to sell the house. He didn't want to let go of the fact that he not coming home or not going back to his job, or his whole life has changed in one day. And that's really what it was. His life was changed in one day, and that in turn made us have to change everything else around it. And that house was a huge burden for all of them so that he could get the care he needed once that house was sold.
Which put you in put a big burden on you then.
Right. The pressure to sell it for a certain amount, to make sure that, that they were getting exactly what they wanted out of it, that it was going to be fast, that it couldn't take time because they didn't have time. In essence, that's a whirlwind of a story after, to find out how much time it actually did take in the long run afterwards. So in retrospect, no matter what, selling a house, it takes time. Like, it's not immediate, and there are so many things that go into it that you need to be aware of from the beginning. So a lot of things that I should have been listening to in the beginning and doing in the beginning, I wasn't really utilizing all that till the end.
Some of that was price, right? Because you and I had talked about where it probably should be priced, and there was some, what I call like an emotional price buffer on there, because it's your family home. It was a lot of, my mom and my dad, and a lot of also that got involved is that my aunt and my uncle also live in Florida in the same development as my parents, right behind them. So their houses are butted up to each other. So they're very much in each other's lives. This is my dad's younger brother, but they're only a couple years apart. And he's highly influenced by them as well. He takes their advice. He takes their decision making. They were in charge of all the other financial stuff besides the house while they were down there. So anything that had to do with, insurance or things that going along with the stroke and everything else down there and their bills down in Florida, my uncle was taking care of, while I was taking care of the responsibilities up north. So yes, there was a certain price range, and there was some argument in the price range. People want what they want. They think that it's worth something else. They may see other homes that are, worth more, and you look at them and you're like, that's not as nice, which we experienced at one point. And everyone is biased to their own home. No matter how you look at it, how you slice it, it doesn't, just because your opinion goes one way doesn't mean somebody else could come in and feel totally different. Sure. And then, like, as ultimately the decision was to let me go, right?
The ultimate decision was to fire Peter.
And
and we discussed this, when it originally happened. The reason why that happened was a lot of influence from my aunt and my uncle. My uncle played golf with another real estate agent's husband that he had said only works in Garden City and knows the area, and she knows everything, and she's the #1 real estate agent in Long Island, and we really want her to do it, and you gotta get right. I don't know this guy, nobody's heard of him, and there was a lot of pushback on their end about that. And as much as I wanted to just keep on doing this, I am the baby of the family, and I can be pushed around in that sense, because of the fact that I was just trying to make them happy and just do what they wanted so that they were pleased. I have a habit of doing that instead of making correct decisions for myself. Even in the situations with my family, we took my dad out of the assisted living facility way before he should have been out of there. So there was a lot of things going on besides just firing you, in the sense of I was making a lot of poor choices along the way.
Do you think that you stigmatize yourself and they also stigmatize you as the baby, so they didn't give you full control?
I did not have, as much as it was in my hands, it was not in my hands because they were on my back every day. They were on the phone with me every day. What's going on? You know, like, what did Peter say? What did this happen? You know, what happened? You know, like, and to be honest, the most communication I had in selling my house was with you. I had no communication with the next real estate agent that I was with. You know, there was no updates. There was no, I didn't see anything going on. I didn't even feel like she was doing any open houses. I felt like the house wasn't being pushed enough. You know, and I went through this very alone. And I was updating my parents constantly, telling them, you know, like, you didn't even give Peter more than 2.5, 3 weeks before you were like, we need this new person. And this person has been absent the whole entire time. Not to mention, now 3 weeks has gone by. I haven't heard from her, nothing. Like, I don't even know if there's been an open house at the house. And I've called and she doesn't answer. So I had that experience as well. And not to say that real estate agent is not nice or, you know, but having somebody be there when you're going through something like this, selling a home, and then you're also on top of that having family issues, you're lost. So you really need somebody to be there to kind of, you know, I turned to you numerous amounts of times actually when I shouldn't have been turning to you. I should have been able to turn to my real estate agent, and you came through for me, and that was something that you didn't have to do. Something you just did because you know the business so well and you feel comfortable talking about it, and you know that was very helpful to me at the time. I just didn't realize that all the things you were saying to me in the beginning, I should have pushed harder to just make the decision for myself, because it did get lost in translation. I don't feel like it worked out better. I don't feel like it worked. It wasn't helpful. It was very, there was no care in selling my parents' house from this new real estate agent, whether she knew my family members or not. It didn't matter. She wasn't present in the whole thing, and she wasn't present with me. So I did find that was an experience did not make me comfortable with, even regardless, just, you know, in general, having somebody sell your home, because you really do want somebody to kind of have some sort of personal connection with you so that they can understand, hey, this house means something to me, and it means something to my family.
Do you think, because I find that, you know, I had to kind of give you some criticism about the price and things like that, and a lot of times that comes off as a slight against the house. It's like it's more emotional than financial a lot of times. And,
correct. And in the beginning, I couldn't see it, and in the end, I saw it more than. So it's that's what I said about going through this whole experience. In the beginning, I felt so I was making very poor choices in everything I was doing for my family, thinking I was doing the right thing, or I was trying to be the right kid and do the right thing by my parents, by my aunt and uncle, making sure that they felt comfortable.
Do you think this is but it all seems very natural, right? Because this is your family home. This is a place where your parents were at one time seemingly indestructible, right? And now you're in charge of this thing that is so important to you, and to hear someone say it's worth less than what your heart says it is, there's got to be an emotional process, almost like its own mourning period, right? To go through that. So it's understandable that there's pushback.
Yeah. This was different though. I think my parents and my family's influence ended up making some of these poor choices that were not helpful for me through this whole experience. I didn't have any help through the experience. And I felt very helpless at times because there's nothing really you can do. Like, you know, you're not really selling the house. You have somebody else selling your house and you don't trust the person who's selling your house. That's a very uncomfortable situation to be in. When I was working with you for this small period of time, you were telling me everything I learned in the end, but didn't know how to process all of it because I'd never done it before. And what do I know? You know what I mean? So going to my parents, to be honest, what do they know? So you were the experienced one, and you actually did tell me a lot of helpful things in the beginning that I don't think I could see at the time, you know, and I did over time. You know, Peter told me that was going to happen. Peter said I wasn't going to get it for this price. You know, like, this is where my market is. The market will tell me, you know, and that's really what happened. The market, you know, and I still think that you probably even could have squeezed a little bit more out of the house than what I got from the real estate agent. I guarantee you probably would have. I still believe that. So why I'm doing this interview, firing experience interview. But yes, through this experience and even towards the end, you were very, very helpful in helping me figure out some of these things and kind of being able to push along, know when to call, know when to, you know, sit back. You know, like the legal part of it that I should have been aware of, you know, that somebody should have been telling me. So that was, you know, it was helpful to know those things that, you know, were not jeopardizing to anyone else, but, you know, helpful as somebody who's selling a house. This is what you should know when you're selling a house. So that was very helpful in going through this experience, which you did not have to do. And that just shows that, you know, you have passion for the job, which is great, because that's what people want. They want you to be passionate about what you do so that they feel comfortable that you're going to do the best for them. And that really was what you were trying to do. And at the time, I really just didn't have that power to say, which in retrospect, like I'm saying now, is I wish I had, you know. And I did call you and tell you I kicked myself in the butt every day because you were right and you were being very honest with me. It was just very hard to hear for me, and it was also hard to hear from my family. And like I said before, what do we know? You know what I mean? We don't know the business. We're just being biased towards the house that we live in, just like you said.
What advice would you give, you know, emotionally or just otherwise, for some people in similar circumstances that need to sell the house they grew up in, need to sell their parents' house? How would you advise them?
Take the emotion out of the selling process. Separate yourself completely from the house you live in. And make sure when you're with the person who's going to be selling your house, they are attentive. They are understanding towards, you know, what you want, but they're giving you the exact, you know, obviously a real estate agent is trying, you know, they do this because it's a business. So they're obviously trying to make money as well. So trust that they actually know what's really in the industry and what houses are selling for, and what you think you're going to get might not be what you're going to get, or maybe what you don't think you could get, you can. So trust that as long as that real estate agent is very in tuned with your situation, not the medical side of the situation, if something is going on in the family, but the situation that, you know, you're going through to sell that house, that they are involved, making sure that they're there, you know, for you. That's very important during that time. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I would love to hear if you have any advice for, really, even on the emotional side, what they can do to kind of, like, because you went through it, it's very hard. Would you do anything different to help your emotionally help you, or do you think it was actually therapeutic in a way? Do you think you benefited from the process, even though it was very hard? Would you do something differently?
I wouldn't have fired Peter.
Well, there's that, right?
I think that I would have cleared my whole entire house from the first day that I was told to clear my house and get everything out of it. I wish I hadn't waited so long I had such an emotional connection, not to the things really, but just to, for some reason, I couldn't take them out of the house. It wasn't that I was, I didn't have to keep it. I just didn't want it to leave the house. I think for a homeowner, and no matter if you're going through like an emotional things with your family, a death, somebody gets sick, a house is just a shell. It's just a place to keep you covered. So things in it are just things, and if a real estate agent's telling you get them out so that you can get what you need from this house, which is what the house is supposed to be providing, get your stuff out. It's important.
Okay. Any last words?
Don't fire Peter Grosso. He's a good real estate agent. He cares about the people. And he was really giving me really, really good advice that I could not process at the time, and I wish I had. So that's my advice to everyone.